went camping with some friends on a hill a few kilometers out in the woods from one of the guys' houses. There's a few hiking / four-wheeler trails in the area that lead up to the hill, so it's known by the locals. It was about midnight. We had a fire going, and we're just sitting around having a good time. Then, the guy opposite me yells, "Who are you?" I turn around, and there's this man, probably 6 feet tall, staring at us from the edge of the woods with a big rock in his hand. One guy knocked an arrow in the composite bow we had. The guy across from me grabbed the hatchet, and I pulled a knife off my belt. We had no clue what we were doing, but the guy wouldn't say anything to us. He eventually just backed into the woods. No sleep was had that night, and we kept a very large fire going. When I was about 10, me and my family of 6 lived in an extremely small apartment, 2-bedroom upstairs, and then the living room. When I was tired of my siblings, I would sleep downstairs. One night I'm lying on the couch, facing the front door, and watching this guy through the window by the door, when a face shows up in the window, illuminated by a lighter. I'm pretty relieved, thinking it was one of our druggy neighbors, seeing if my parents were still awake when it showed up again. I tried to scream, but when I did, nothing came out. Not a sound. The person then kicks in the door and walks in the room. He sees me, smiles, goes towards the kitchen. As he comes out of the kitchen with a knife, my dad makes his way down the stairs, and the guy books it out of there. I can't sleep easily on couches to this day. We were partying at a usual party spot by the river, and some dude came out of the woods. He just kept saying weird shit like, "You gotta watch yourself down there. There's some really bad folks around here." When we asked who he was, he just said, "I'm nobody." We're all a little sketched out, and basically told the guy to fuck off. A couple of days later, a girl went off the rope swing there and got really fucked up. Someone had put fish hooks all over the bottom of the rope swing, and it took chunks of flesh out of her leg. Later, we found out that the dude was just a guy who lived nearby, and although he was a creepy drunk, he was completely harmless. There was a fucked up, probably inbred family that lived up the road that he would warn people about. About 5 years later, they beat up some kid with a log, and then kidnapped some girl at gunpoint and took her on a joyride. Me and my friends were driving home from a show we all went to. This was about 7 years ago or so in the Credos area. There's an elementary school, I think on 186. I forget what it's called, but anyway. We drove by a local elementary school, all of us joking and laughing, or whatever 16-year-olds do. And my friend's girlfriend looks over at the playground in the school and screamed. She refused to talk to anyone for a few hours. We asked her what was wrong, what she saw, what happened, but nothing would make her tell us. We all thought she saw someone on the playground or a dead body or something. All of us knew that she was seriously spooked. Now for some backstory, I should add that she's sensitive to paranormal happenings. I should also add that I don't really believe in ghosts or the like, but whatever. She would have doors fly open at her old house, clothes hangers fly off the rail, cups fall over, and then right themselves multiple times. Just crazy shit. Anyway, she eventually told her boyfriend what she had seen. She said she had briefly seen a bunch of bloody covered people walking around the playground aimlessly. I immediately started blaming exhaustion, as it was around 2 a.m. when we drove by. We looked it up later, and it turns out a plane had crashed into the school in the late 80s, and a lot of people had died. When I was young, I'd say 8 to 11-ish, my sister, whom is 7 years older, would babysit me when my parents were out. At the time, she smoked a lot, and my parents made her smoke outside, of course. So, I'd follow her outside into the carport, which faced the street, and played around, annoyed her, and such. One day, my sister notices a car at the end of the driveway, just sitting in the road. It's a white SUV, I believe a mid-90s Bravado, not sure, with a bike rack on top. It has the most tinted windows I've ever seen. You could not see inside from the side. It sat there until she went inside, then would drive to the end of the road and sit at the church parking lot and wait. Wait until she'd come out again for another smoke. And it would repeat this. Odd, but my sister is a brave lady and just kind of ignored it. That is, until the next day while my parents were out again, and it showed up again. It would sit at the end of the driveway and just watch. I don't know what the driver was doing, but he was watching my sister. If I didn't go out, I'd watch from the front window, and it would just sit there and watch my sister. She told my father, who was a sheriff's deputy at the time, and he called the cops and made a complaint. They showed up, looked around, but the SUV was nowhere to be seen. Months went by, and nothing. Then one day, a good 9 months after this had all started, and 4-ish since the last sighting, it was back. It became a regular occurrence. Another day, my sister was outside doing her nasty habit, and sure enough, here it comes. This time we were alone as usual, and she decides she's had enough. She tells me to stay in the carport, and she's going to go confront them. She starts walking towards the SUV, and halfway down the driveway, she would later remark to us, I felt utter terror, like I knew if I went any further I was dead. I was paralyzed by pure fear. She turned around and went inside. Finally, the family car was in the shop for some kind of issue, so we were all stuck home for a night and had to get delivery, etc. While my parents are home, my sister goes outside to smoke. I go outside with her, and eventually the SUV shows up. She tells me to run inside and tell my father, and I do. My dad promptly gets his gun and starts briskly walking down the driveway with it in hand, in the direction of the SUV, but not leveled towards it. The SUV floored it, down the road and peeled out onto the nearby large highway. My dad, being a cop, noted the year and model and distinguishing features. The scariest thing? The license plate had been covered in duct tape. We never saw it again, and my sister just kind of shrugs it off now. When I was 7 years old, I was walking to my babysitter's house all by myself. She only lived a block from the schoolyard. I'd done it all the time. This car pulls up beside me on the road, and the driver keeps gesturing to me to come closer and shouting, "Come here! Come here!" I'm frozen on the sidewalk and shaking my head no, while my knuckles turn white, clinging to my backpack. All he says before driving off is, "Stay away from Christina," and then I never saw him again. Christina was one of my on-again, off-again friends in grade school, along with another girl who alternated between hating me and being buddy-buddy. I had completely forgotten about it after a while, and went on being on again and off again with both of them. In the 5th grade, the other girl invited me to the pop machine in the back hall at lunch. Cool. Okay. Quality time with a girl I've known since I was a baby. Sure. We get back to the classroom. Christina tells me that people were playing with my lunch and hid my stuff, but she was nice enough to bring it back for me. I started drinking the pop I'd brought for lunch, and something was really off. I spit it out and ran for the water fountain to rinse my mouth out. Turns out, Christina and her sister had topped up my drink with Lysol. If I drank much more, I probably would have been stupidly sick. The police were called, and a restraining order was put on both of them. It was delightfully ineffective, however, because the school was so small there was no separate class to put them in. They got 3 and 4 day suspensions. I have no idea if the two events are related, who that man was, or how he knew how bad Christina was at the time. But that memory sticks with me to this day. I was 6 or 7 years old in my parents' apartment and heading towards the kitchen. I go towards the kitchen where my mom is talking on the phone. At the end of the corridor in front of me, I see the front door opening and then halting because of the door chain holding it. I thought it was my dad. It was about 11 in the morning, so I think my dad will close the door and ring the doorbell for my mom to open up the chain. It was weird, because I hadn't heard the key turning, except nobody rings the door, and an enormous hairy hand that definitely doesn't belong to my father tries to pull on the chain. Immediately, I understand it's a burglar. I rush to slam shut the door with my entire body while I whine a little no. So there's me slamming against the door with all my 7-year-old strength, panicked out of my mind, and then putting all my weight against the infernal piece of wood, with a huge burglar on the other side, trying to keep the door open so he can pull the chain off. Fingers try to grab the end of the chain, and my mother, completely oblivious about 12 feet away in the next room. I tried to scream at my mother. I remember yelling muffled pieces of, "Mom? Mom?" But she thinks I'm horsing around and pays no attention. It's after my 7th or 8th scream, when I was about to give up all hope, when I heard my mom say that she'll call her back because I've done something and needs to check on me. The burglar heard her and let me close the door. My mom arrives and demands to know what I'm doing. I'm crying at that point, not being able to utter a coherent sentence, trying to point at the door, saying only burglar out, or something to that effect. My mother, not getting the hint, comes over and tries to open the door to see what the fuss is all about, with me still pushing against it. As soon as I realized what she was about to do, I tried to push her away, crying and sobbing at her. "Don't open the door. There's a burglar outside." I had to fall on my ass, and then on my knees and beg her against trying to push me aside, before she decides to change her mind and look through the peephole instead of opening the door. She looks through it in a hurry and starts saying, "See, there's no one and I see her very annoyed face turn pale as a sheet all of a sudden. She grabs me and pushes me aside from the door and tells me to go get her phone. I rush to the kitchen, and while doing so, I heard her yell through the door, "I can see you crouching." "You're behind the door. I'm not gonna open, and I'm calling the police right this minute." The bastard was still behind the door, crouching as low as he could, not making a sound, so my mom would think that no one was outside as she opened the door, and he'd rush inside. My mom called the police, and after 5 minutes of my mom issuing threats through the door, we heard someone creeping away from the hallway and down the building entrance and outside the building door. My mom was white as a sheet, not making a sound or expressing any emotion throughout the whole ordeal. After about half an hour later, my father arrived, oblivious to the whole thing. When my mom told him about what had happened, he went and got a new lock and a better door chain. The police arrived that afternoon, a full 5 hours later, even though the police station is a 10-minute drive from our house. I don't think the burglar was ever caught. When I was younger, my family was extremely poor and lived in a very old mobile home on some land my grandpa owned. This piece of land was in a very small town out in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and covered in woods. The town itself was your typical small country town where football was king, and there was nothing to do but get drunk or high on the weekend. It was also the town, along with it being the early 90s, where one didn't typically have to worry about locking their doors or setting an alarm. Now our trailer has a 2-bedroom, and my parents, always putting us kids ahead of themselves, slept in the lounge room on the fold-out couch. My room was directly connected to it, and my sister's was down a hallway past the kitchen and bathroom at the other end of the trailer. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, my dad was woken up by the feeling that there was someone in the room. He looked around a bit and sees a large male figure sitting in the easy chair, just feet away from my bed. My dad quickly flipped on the light switch next to his bed and saw it was a neighbor from down the road called Carter. Carter was known to be a frequent drug user and was often in trouble with the law. He responded, "I can't get out. The demons are chasing me, and your house is the only safe one." My dad, who I should say is a fairly large and terrifying person, responded that if he didn't get out, and get out quickly, that the house would be a lot less safe for him. "If I leave, they'll get me. They've been chasing me all night. If they catch me, I'm dead." My dad's response was that there was no demons, but that if he didn't get the fuck out of the house, he'd be dead. From what I've been told, as I was asleep for this part, my mom also hurled a few threats, and while she may not be big, she was equally as terrifying. I believe it was her anger that finally scared him off. My dad got up and locked the door before he watched through the blinds as Carter decided since he couldn't outrun the demons, he'd steal our old meter Suburban that my dad always left the keys in. He drove around for about an hour. We called the police, and it took them about that long to get to us, since the closest police station was about 20 to 30 minutes away. He finally brought it back and was arrested and taken to jail. He was deemed crazy and locked up in a mental institution. The scariest part is that, for years after this, we'd get phone calls where all we'd hear is music lyrics that would always have lyrics like, "I'm gonna fucking kill you." These calls lasted for years and followed us from house to house, even though we always had different numbers and would even be in different states. We always thought it was him sending us a message. The calls stopped when I was about 12. I later found out that it was around this time that Carter thought the best thing he could do for himself was soak himself in gasoline and set himself on fire. moved to my dad's when I was 10 and didn't know anyone in the area, except for the family my dad was friends with, a single mom with 3 kids. Luckily, there was a girl a couple years older than me. I was 12 at the time I met her, and we got to know each other a little over a couple years. We weren't close, but ended up having the same friends. One night my friend Rob was hanging out with her and her younger brother. They happened to be in the house alone because my friend's mom was at work, which is where this gets terrifying and sad. Her mother has been helping this one lady through her work and got to know her fairly well. She found out her sister was in a mental institution and was let out recently. The night Rob is hanging out with my friend, they get a knock on the door. My friend thought it was just their mom, as she knocks a certain way when coming in, and answered it without thinking. Rob wasn't supposed to be there, and he took off through the window to his house down the road. He never thought twice about it. It wasn't her mom. It was the sister of the lady her mom was helping, and she figured out through talking to her sister where her family lived and her mom's working schedule. She came in. This is where I don't know details, and I'm glad I don't. My friend's younger brother got away to the neighbors to call the police. The lady brutally murdered my friend a week from Christmas, decapitated her, and left her body naked in a bathtub. She even hid her head. They had to look through the presents, and I don't know where they found it, but they did. I wasn't allowed to go to her funeral. My cousin and his family, wife and infant son, had lived in their house for about 5 years. His wife left home to drop the baby off at daycare before work, but realized she had left her phone at home. Entering the house, she turned the corner to the hallway and nearly ran into the drop-down attic ladder, which was fully extended. They never used the attic as it was filled with loose insulation, and my cousin had left for work hours earlier. She quietly left the house, drove around the corner, and called the police. When the police investigated, they found a short-range transmitter connected to several cameras hidden throughout their home, the light fixture in the shower, the ceiling fan above their bed, even a pinhole in the nursery were sending videos to a nearby location. Their neighbor a few houses away had given a key by the prior owners and installed surveillance equipment once he knew their schedule. My cousin's wife walked in on him updating his equipment, but he forgot something at his house and left to get it when she walked in. He had been watching them for years.